Hey everyone, welcome back to Level Up the Career Playbook, where we unpack how top performers actually grow, lead, and win at work. If you are new here, I am Brian Bell, longtime HR business partner and founder of MambaHR. I started this podcast after getting laid off, and I wanted to answer one question. How do the best people build their careers that last and that matter? Now, today's guest is someone I've wanted to talk to since the beginning of starting this podcast. I think she was the first person or the second, that's going to sound weird, that I emailed or texted. It was between you and Meredith. This is someone I wanted to talk to from the beginning, Danielle Peretore. Her path, it's impressive. Brown undergrad, Harvard MBA, Deloitte, BCG, and now a top operator driving strategic growth and people alignment in some of the most respected organizations out there. But what stands out the most isn't just the resume, it's how she thinks. Danielle's built a reputation for helping companies scale smarter, not just faster. She connects strategy and execution, vision with clarity, and most importantly, people with performance. In this episode, we cover the leadership skills that actually matter, how to make strategy real for your team, not just a slide deck, why reflection and feedback loops are the ultimate growth tools, and how AI, structure, and habits are shaping the next generation of operators. Whether you're leading teams now or want to be invited in the room where strategy happens, Danielle drops the kind of insight that's going to stick. That's why she's here on the show. She stuck with me as well. And I was her HR business partner for a little bit, and it was amazing. Danielle Peretore, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Brian. I'm doing great. It's a Friday afternoon, sunny and beautiful.
We
Things are
made it.
great.
The kids are doing good. You're doing good. I'm super happy about this. I'm excited. We're going to spend the next hour where I'm going to open your brain and we're going to learn how to be Danielle in 1 hour. You're going to teach us how to do that, okay?
Okay. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so a couple of housekeeping things. Folks, if you're listening, please like and subscribe. 2, I will make sure in the description to get more information on how to connect with Danielle if you're interested. But 3, this is called the Level Up Podcast, sponsored by MambaHR. MambaHR is named after Kobe Bryant's Mamba mentality. The reason why I picked that is because I fell in love with Kobe fell in love with the process. He fell in love with the day-to-day, the grind, the boring part of all of the process. And so this is more of a sports-related themed podcast. And because of that, we'll have sports-related segments that we'll go into. And the first segment, Danielle, is the pregame.
Hey.
So imagine that we'll talk about kind of early on in your foundations that set you up for success. Okay. But before we get to that, the real pregame, who is Danielle? Why do you think and tell people that are listening or watching, why did I invite you and have been so excited to get you on?
Man, who is Danielle? I think first and foremost, I'm a mom. I have 2 little kids, 2 toddlers. They're adorable and also wild. I am also, I always lean towards the personal stuff first. I'm a mom. I got 2 dogs. You can see one of them if you're going to be watching this on YouTube in the background, big into the rescue dogs and reading books, love yoga. That's kind of my me side, big with on my family. I'm Sicilian and Italian and I have a giant family and we're all kind of up in each other's business. But professionally, I am a business thinker is probably the best way to describe what I like to do on a daily basis. I like to think about what makes businesses tick, what makes businesses succeed, but also really what makes people tick and what make people succeed. Because at the end of the day, what is a business? It is a collection of human beings with needs, feelings, emotions, capabilities, challenges, worries. And so those are the things I like to think about, and spend my time doing.
I love your intro because you did lead with who you are. And I think people get drawn to just the Danielle, but underneath all of it, I don't think people understand you're extremely, extremely smart. And I think that's going to show up in here. And so you were being very humble in your intro, but that's cool. That's who you are. We'll unpack some of that. And we'll start with someone that's very, very smart. I remember we sat in a room and you mentioned something about where you went to school. And I was like, okay, so we will start there. So you've had
Okay.
one of the most elite educations out there, Brown, Harvard. You are humble about it. Don't speak about it. But what do you say? What are some of the most important things that you learned about how you operate today?
Yeah, I think at Brown and Harvard, what are the
Yes.
things that I
Yeah.
learned?
Because that's the elite place,
Totally.
right? Where you come out and you're ready to run
Totally.
the world.
For sure. I think, well, first off, so I am very grateful that I went to both schools, but the school that really shaped me was Brown. And probably part of that was because of, the tender age at which you go off to college. You leave home. I actually was young. I wasn't even 18. I was only 17 when I went off to college. You're just coming out of high school, which is probably the most, maybe not for all, but I think for a lot of people is the most confusing 4 years of your life. You're newly free. You can do whatever you want. There's no one looking at, what you're doing on a daily basis. There's like kind of no rules. But I think also in particular, Brown prides itself on having no rules in a way that I found so liberating. I had gone to Catholic elementary school, and for what it's worth, I was always in trouble. And then went to a very intense prep school for high school where it felt like my life was governed by, rules and what I was supposed to be doing at any point in time. And I was studying all the time and so tired and stressed out in high school in a way that, frankly, it's not something I want for my kids. That's a conversation for another day. But, I arrived at Brown, and Brown prides itself on being a place that celebrates freedom and diversity of opinion and diversity of choice. And Brown basically says to you, we trust you. We know that you are smart. We know that you are thoughtful. We are here to provide some very loose guidelines. And otherwise, like, we're not going to ask you to define who you are and what you want to do right away. Or I don't think I even had to pick a major. And at that point, I could have created my own major. They don't even care if you can do whatever you want until maybe my junior year. They say, come on in. We expect that you are going to grow. We expect that you are going to change. We expect that your understanding of yourself and the world around you is going to change. Like, embrace it. I walked into Brown thinking I was going to do biomedical engineering. I went to exactly one class and said, I'm out of here. Sorry, Brown. That was on my like application essay. They were like trying to get more like female biomedical.
Gotcha.
That was a real favor. I was a real, not favor, excuse me, a real downer for them. But, I spent that time, the different, I think I've always had like a sense of who I was internally in some way, but I tried on so many different personas and so many different things that I was interested in. I mean, I ended up, the degrees I got from Brown are so weird. I ended up with a cognitive neuroscience degree because I like thinking about the brain, and my mom insisted that I had to get a science degree. So that's where we went. And then I spent time in Brazil. I fell in love with Brazil and ended up getting a degree in Portuguese and Brazilian studies. Like, my friends from Brown are so different and diverse in terms of like who they are and what they do. And I think the only thing that actually like links us all together is that in some way we are all a little bit, we've got something about us. It's like a little bit different, like a little bit offbeat, like a little bit looking for, what is the way that I want to do things, not necessarily the way that I'm told to do things. So that was Brown. And, by the time I got to Harvard, after I graduated from Brown, I went to BCG, not Deloitte. Brian, there's a big difference. Okay.
I can do that.
I'm joking. I'm totally joking. I have so much respect for both institutions. But I went to BCG, and BCG at the time was also, quite frankly, like a very intense place with kind of a lot of rules about how, who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to show up and how you're supposed to dress and how you're supposed to act. By definition, what a firm like BCG does is they hire very young people to go advise very senior people. And there's a lot of kind of like norms or restrictions that come along with that. And so I kind of felt, thrust from Brown back into this world that maybe felt a little more rigid to me, even though I'm super grateful for the skills that I learned there. And then went off to LinkedIn back when, believe it or not, it was actually a relatively small company, and, felt a little bit more of that kind of expansiveness and freedom working in tech. And I really liked that and thrived there. But then I've got a tiger mom. My like little, very fierce Sicilian mom insisted that I take my GMAT at some point when she thought I was hanging around too much one summer in college, and I had a score that was going to expire. And she just signed me up for this class actually not even the class, God forbid. She signed me up for the test and like shoved me in. I had a score that was going to expire, and I figured I should, use it to try to see what I wanted to do next, and got into HBS and went. And I'm so glad that I went to HBS, and that it's the most global experience you could possibly have. And I think gave me a lot of empathy for different people and different situations and different cultures. But HBS was also quite an intense environment. And I think definitely kind of put me in a place again of challenging, what did I really want and who did I really want to be and what felt authentic to me versus kind of the rules of the road. Both, I got great things from both places, but my heart place will always be Brown.
That is incredible. One, thank you, Mama Peretore, for pushing and doing what we needed to do there to get you there.
Janice doesn't mess around. She really
Something
does.
would have told me you would have got there, but Mama knew what was going on.
Oh
But
yeah, she does.
two, something I'm very curious about, because right before we hit record, I was telling you about how I've just kind of tried to figure it out on my own. And I think for you, you mentioned, especially at HBS and at BCG, it felt like there was some structure that was provided to you. Is there something that people that are earlier in the career, or just actually in general, can take? What was some of the structure? What were some of the fundamental blocks you think you got from early on that really set you for how to operate to working with higher up people or more experienced people?
Yeah. It's so interesting because I look back at that time and I feel like I learned two things. I learned some of these like really foundational important skills. And I also learned that I don't like rules. And that, whenever there's rules, I tend to kind of like, is this really a rule?
Sound
You
like
know,
my daughter.
well, I am, yeah, like I am, like, oof, me and jury duty. We have long and,
I've got a
challenge.
summons too. Oh, God.
But yeah, we've got a long and, challenge history for another day because it's me being forced to do something and I didn't agree. And so, by the way, this is exactly how my daughter is. My almost 2-year-old daughter has we got a message the other day from her preschool administrator that she is a vibe. There is do not try to tell her what she is going to do. She'll make that call.
Love
And
that. I love
we
that
just
part.
wonder where that came from. It's like it's really so shocking.
Random.
N Now, that said, what I think I did really learn in those environments, and I frankly credit mostly to BCG and then to some of the leaders that I worked with, when I was on the biz ops team, which was the strategy team at LinkedIn, a couple in particular, like, who really shaped my career path actually for up until today. Like, I have followed leaders from that time in my life, like, more or less even until now, was just the way to think about and break down problems. And I think that being able to this sounds so trite, but like being able to take a problem and break it down into its components and then figure out of those components, how would you answer a problem based on one component being true or false? And then like continue to break a problem down into its own pieces. But then I think there's also a way of thinking that enables you to say, let me take a step back from this problem and put that within the broader context of the business. And that is something that I also would credit HBS to doing. There's forced kind of the way the case method works. And again, like it was exhausting for me my first year there to learn this, but is that you are asked to dive into, very little about a business and you are forced to opine on it publicly in front of 90 people while what you're commenting is being written down and recorded for like later grading. And so it just forces you to learn how to not take one thing and dive so deep on it, but rather be able to place that within the broader context of what's happening and what's going on, which I think is a really key skill to working with leaders.
Okay. That's huge that you've had then the bigger context that was kind of instilled in you from the beginning. Because I think even early in my career, I had these small pieces and lenses. And then finally now, after 10, 15 years, I'm like, oh, that's why you had me
Yeah,
do that really stupid thing. I really wish 10 years ago you would have explained that to me and I would have done it a lot better, a lot faster, and I would have actually made the process better.
totally.
That's what you're getting early on. You're getting the 10 to 15 years crash course of hands-on upfront. Okay, now we're getting
Exactly.
somewhere. That's
And
so
you're forced to without ever having learned the ins and outs, which by the way can be a problem and is part of why, at one point in my career, I decided to really take a turn towards more of like the deep operations and being a sales leader, for example, right? Because you can't be a super effective leader unless you have had experience with why those little things do matter as well. And I think in particular as a leader, if you're as a leader only we're focused on the big picture, you're only focused on breaking a problem down into its components and then weighing those components against one another, what you can miss is that someone has to do the little stuff. And those things can be very painful. And you can't just sweep them under the rug. They're actually very important, both for the functioning of the company, but also for leaders to be empathetic to those who are in the trenches.
110 minutes in, we already have some jewels here. I want to take that. Let's flip this on its side. What is something that you wish you did learn back then? So you did have this amazing education and experience and crash course that most people dream about, right? And it sets you ahead very, very nicely. But what is something you think that maybe you didn't get that you wish you would have learned? And this is something that folks that
Yeah.
are early in their career can apply.
Yeah, I think that when I was both at BCG and I was at LinkedIn at the time, I'm dating myself now, but it was a slightly different like work world and environment, and I was working such long hours, and the stress levels were very high. What I have found in the last, and I do think that by the way, the AI and some of the AI race and AI startups are going back towards this model, which actually disheartens me a little bit if at times. I think I was sometimes I was so tired that I wasn't really able to be present and taking in these kind of leadership conversations in the way that I wish I could have. And some of that is on me as well, right? Because it took me years to learn how to be really effective and efficient with my work, but I was sometimes so frustrated and so tired that I think it put me in a headspace where I wasn't necessarily able to soak up and take in the good and participate in the conversation at the level that I wanted to. Because execs, when you're an analyst, like you're showing up and you're thinking about your one piece and you've thought so deeply about it and you've spent a week on it and late nights and you know it inside out, backwards, forwards, and sideways. And then you get into an exec conversation and it is one piece of the puzzle. And I was so exhausted by having produced that one output that I sometimes think I lost track of that broader conversation. Obviously, over time, I found that I got there. And not only did I get there, that's a piece that I love. But I think it was something I wish I had tried to find a better balance with, so that I could have enjoyed that versus just feeling the pain of it.
If a mentor came and was like, Danielle, I noticed that you're
Yeah.
too zoned in. Do you think back then you would have been able to snap out of it? Or is it truly an experience thing? Or would you have been able to say, you know what? You're right. Let me absorb this better. Is that possible if you'd have known?
I think I think yes and no. I think that I can look back at there was one manager that I had at BCG and then another manager that I had at LinkedIn that really helped break that cycle for me. And so I do think like just having someone and this is like my broad philosophy on management, which I'm sure we'll get into later, but so many sins are covered when you just make someone know that you deeply care about them. There's actually now we're getting into some therapy talk, but I think there is some like weird transference in the manager like managee relationship that actually has to do with like there's a transference almost of the parent child relationship. And so, especially when you're young and you're starting out and you're nervous and you're scared, what you do is you really look towards your manager as almost this kind of it's a little bit of like a parental element. And what you want from them is, I've got you, I will take care of you, I hear you. And of course, not all managers are going to provide that or even can, depending on the environment. So I think there were a couple of people who just really showed genuine care for me in a way that helped me to take in what they were saying and try, and they would basically I think what people said that really helped with that is, Danielle, I know you. I know you made the right decisions in your analysis. I trust you. So I trust what you have. I don't need to go deeper into that with you for right now. Or I've done the checks. Now I want to help you see the next stage of things. And just knowing that I had that kind of approval, care, you get where I'm going with this. It helped me to do that.
I think that's
It's also
sorry. Sorry.
Oh,
Go
no. Yeah, I was gonna say it's also time. Like, it's also just time and seat and learning this.
Yeah, I sorry to interrupt. I was going to just agree that I think you said something huge about having the manager that gives you that push. I think what ends up happening, especially for the top performers, high potential, Danielle's got it. I don't need to tell her. I need to focus on
Totally.
the problems. And so a lot of times I don't think people actually get that. So if you're a manager, or you're trying to be a manager, or you're leading people, remember just that small little push to your point. And I'm glad you said that. That does matter. It matters a ton. And I remember when you get that little, it feels like you said, like parent and child, you get that little thumbs up and you're ready
Yep,
to run through another wall for something
100%.
so small. And it would set you in
100%.
the head. So managers, if you're listening, people leaders, if you're listening, that matters. And make sure you're doing something and try to do something this week. All right, let's dive in a little bit more there. Okay, so we talked about BCG. BCG is Bain Consulting Group.
Boston Consulting
Boston
Group.
Consulting.
Brian, I'm gonna give you a tutorial on all the consulting firms, all of them.
Okay. And this is why I had to explain it, because I'm like, no, it's Bain. It's Bain. It's Boston. Okay.
So there's Bain. The big 3
Okay.
are Bain, BCG, Boston Consulting Group, and McKinsey. And then there's Accenture and Deloitte and PwC that sit in
And
like
I've
a
been
kind of
throwing all
slightly
just the horrible names out there. I've just been
Yeah.
disrespecting you. All right.
No, 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 they just do something slightly different. They're all incredible companies. Shout out here to all of my friends and family members that work at all of these incredible companies.
So yeah, we're not downing any of them. I'm
We're
just
not doing
downing you by not getting it right. Now we'll get better. Now at BCG, as a consultant, what do you think? Was there an early project or a specific manager situation? You just said there was that moment when they just lifted you up. Walk me through a specific moment or experience that just really, bing, that shaped who you are today.
Yeah, I remember this distinctly. I was working with a woman there who at the time was like a new manager and now has become a partner, which is like cool to see someone um that I, respect and appreciate so much and in a such a position of leadership there. So I graduated in 2009 and I was an intern. I got very lucky because I was an intern at BCG in my junior year of college. I got an internship in 2008. in 2009, of course, between 2008 and 9, the world ended for a lot of us, early graduates. And so I was very lucky that I had a job because I had had the internship. But had it not been for interns who already had offers to come back, they would have probably mostly paused hiring during that year, that, terrible year. And so what happened in my first year was they didn't really have enough work for all of us, especially if you're a brand new analyst. You have to be taught so much that they can't just like throw you into a project with more senior leaders or more senior people. It has to be like the right project and the right manager. And at a time when work was drying up, those projects were kind of far and few between. And so I spent most of my first year there kind of getting bounced around to different projects, which was really challenging because I would work with one manager for a short period of time, another one for another short period of time. And then there's no one like investing in you and like teaching you skills. And so I remember at my like almost 1 year mark, I had my review, and consulting, it's so funny. Like the person who gives you your review, you don't even work with. And they sat me down and were like, listen, you've got to pick up your performance if you want to be able to get promoted here. Because there's usually 2 year promotion timelines in consulting. And I was like, oh my God. And I got put on a project that seemed at its outset like quite boring, but I just wanted a good manager and a project that wanted to have me. And I started working with this woman who I deeply respect. And, I showed up there scared out of my mind, right? Like I was a high achiever. I was the A+ student. Do you know what I recently found out actually when I gave birth to my daughter? My blood type is A positive. Like my blood type is
Of
A plus.
course it is.
Right. Like I was
Rare is that? Is that?
I don't think it's that common.
Yeah, that's not. That's anyway. Of course it is, though. Of course it's A plus.
It's just to say you give a poor performance review to someone like me, and I was scared out of my mind. And I think she knew that. And she sat me down and was like, here are the things that I see you do well, and here's where I can help you. And she invested time in me, but she was just very clear from the beginning that she saw that I could do this and she believed in me. It changed the arc probably of my entire career. I ended up doing really well on that project. And then moving on to another project and doing well, and then deciding I got to get out of here. I got to go. No more flying to, wherever random place for 4 days a week. Like I want to go have a social life. And obviously went to LinkedIn and was very successful there. But part of that was it was a different environment. And I'd already had people investing in me and teaching me some of the skills I needed to succeed in a way that then enabled me to something I do think, and I tell people on my teams all the time, is that beyond like a very basic level of skills that most people learn in their first, if you're in a given career, your first like 1 to 2 years in that career, it really behooves most of us to focus actually on our strengths and then just kind of like cover your weaknesses, right? You need to trying to invest in taking your weakness and making it your strength is actually not, it's kind of an inauthentic way to operate. And I think it can hinder you as a leader. What you want to do instead is think of what am I really good at? And let me lean into that. And then make sure that none of these weaknesses I'm kind of bringing along with me, let me make sure that I'm at par on those, right? Like no one's going to point to those and have that be something that's going to take me off track. And so when I got to LinkedIn, I worked for, he wasn't my direct manager, this guy, Dan Yu, who was the head of the biz ops team. And he really thought that way. And he's been like, a lifelong now, mentor and someone who's really important to me. Just kind of identified those things in me and just reminded me of them.
I love. I love that.
Yeah. And I try and be that, to what extent I can. And remembering what it's like to be in those shoes is, I think, something, I hope all leaders never lose.
Last question. We'll move to the next segment. Of figuring out your weaknesses. Was this self-awareness, or was it somebody saying, Danielle, like it was a review. So of course they talk about things you're not doing well. Was it stuff that you already knew that you were weak in? And because I'm trying to figure out for people listening, is it you really need to figure out how yourself out. You need to have some self-awareness. You need to do the exercises or whatever. Or was it you just got lucky with the performance reviews and mentors?
I think it's a combination. When you're that young and you are that new, it is so hard to know what you are doing well and not doing well. It is so hard. I mean, you are a fish out of water. I mean, you've just been literally plucked from the frat party, right? Like you went from the frat party to the boardroom. You are, and by the way, in a field like consulting where you have very young people working with very senior leadership, I mean, I'll never forget. I was at a customer meeting at a customer meeting, then we had dinner with the customer after, and the customer starts talking about his grandchildren. And he looks at me and he goes, "Hear about my granddaughters." I was like, how am I just gave you advice. Like this has got to be a joke. So anyway, I think that, and this is the really challenging. Part of it is that something I did not do when I was younger and I wish I had done and I try to do now is proactively ask for feedback. It is so hard because you are so afraid of what you're going to hear, right? I am still afraid of what I'm going to hear. I ask my husband if he's mad at me and I'm afraid of what I'm going to hear, right? It's just that's just kind of the nature of being human is that hearing things that are you're not doing well are just it is painful. But if you do it with someone who you trust, what you hope is that they tell you the things you're doing well and then couch that with like, here's what you can do better. Here's what you can do to accelerate. Now, people who have a brain like mine and A plus blood type, I can't tell you how many managers I've had who have been, Danielle, I don't know how what you took from that 1 hour conversation about how well you're doing is the one thing that I said you did wrong, but that is the one thing. And I'm like, that's all I heard, So um, I don't mean to minimize it, but I think that is really the way to succeed with those kinds of conversations.
Okay. I love it. Let's move to the next segment. We're going to do the game strategy in motion. So
Okay.
talk about designing and executing for impact. Okay. So let's get into the strategy part here. You're building your scaling business strategy. What are you paying attention to? What signals are you paying attention to first? How are you pressure testing it? What are you doing from the beginning? And walk me through like, okay, Danielle, go do that thing. Go.
Yeah.
What do you,
Okay.
what's the playbook?
Should I give you the context, like, for what I've been doing now at Figma, how I thought about that? Maybe the best way
That'd
to
be
think about
amazing.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I mean, so I think that it's kind of funny. The more senior you get, the less feedback you get, the less you have, any direction, right? It's kind of like, we hired you, you know this, so we'll talk. We'll talk later. And
See you later.
so
Just go figure it out.
exactly. I think that learning to get comfortable with that has been a journey, especially as you're more junior and you are used to coming into a situation and there are defined criteria for success. In all of my last roles, maybe being a VP of sales was slightly different because you actually have numbers that you need to hit. But other than that, from I would say for the last probably about the last decade, every role that I have walked into, it's not like they're roles like when you're younger where they're hiring into a specific role and your expectations are that you do these specific things well. It's more we're hiring you, Danielle, and now you have to kind of craft and shape this role to what you are good at and kind of bring your unique stamp to. But by the way, there are probably some expectations of you that we are maybe not communicating, and you'll
You'll
find out.
find out later though. Good luck.
Yeah. 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 You'll find out in 3 to 6 months, depending on how bad it is. So I mean, Figma, I think, is probably a great example of this. And truly, I'm so grateful to be working there. Figma, for what it's worth, like, quick plug, incredible company to work for. I've been at Figma now almost 6 months, and I've truly been having the time of my
An
life.
incredible product.
Oh
I
yes,
love it.
I thank you for that feedback. Yes, that is very true. We also have just the most outstanding product and engineering teams I've ever worked with. Major kudos to them for that. When I came into Figma, I was hired by our CFO, who actually used to work for me way back in the day. And then I was his reference for Figma and got to watch him rise this like incredible trajectory as he built Figma from the ground up. And now he's my boss, which is the best full circle moment ever. Um, and he's, it's just like so inspiring for me to be in the position that I am now. And when what came in, he was like, listen, there's a team that we have underinvested in. This BizOps team, there's a couple of people. They are great. They have been doing an awesome job, but there is no BizOps brand. Who are we? What do we do? There's a bunch of stuff on my mind that I think that you should go take a look at, but mostly I want you to go figure out what the problems are. And coming in, it's hard to give a playbook for exactly how to do that, except to say that there was a lot of intuition. There's a lot of leaning back into my intuition and where I felt like I was seeing problems and then identifying. So, and actually just for a piece of context, my role at Figma for Figma BizOps is strategy across everything. And Figma is a very product driven company. And it's been a decade since I've worked with product. I mean, I've spent the last decade running go to market strategy and then being a head of sales. So I've been really far from the world of, product and engineering. And so it was really important that I felt like my intuition was quite strong on what was happening in our go to market world and found a couple of projects that I could get into there quite quickly to build my intuition and sense of understanding of Figma, learning the product, learning the space. This was all new to me with territory that felt a little more familiar. earlier. And then identifying a couple of, key people in the organization that I recognized as people who were really just like fellow thinkers, people who thought about the business in the way that I did, who were influential, not because they were kind of power hungry, but influential because they were smart and they were the kind of people who saw a problem and got things done and spent the time to really understand how the different parts of the business connected. So there's someone in product in particular that I learned to really lean on. There's someone actually on the sales side I learned to really lean on, someone in engineering, some people in our finance teams. And I kind of got really humble because Figma is fundamentally, we are in the product development space. And I have been in sales selling HR and productivity tools for the last decade. So there was a real need to figure out the people with whom I could ask the dumb questions and just really be unafraid to ask them. And it's a very scary place to be coming in as a senior leader to be saying, I don't understand this very basic thing about our market or about our product, but I need you to help me learn. But I'm really glad I did it. And, the thing that I take away from that is I think that leaders who come in with that lack of expertise in the area that you're being asked to work in, when you fail is actually when you choose to not become vulnerable.
Mm.
When you are not willing to say, I don't know this, help me learn it. And okay, now having told me those things, this is what my gut would say. This is what I'm able to pattern match to what I've done before. Tell me if I'm wrong. Where you actually fail is when you're trying to hide that you don't know. And then, just showing up to conversations, not owning that, and therefore like seeming off track. So it was hard. It was vulnerable, but I'm really glad I did it.
Really like that you are being honest about, look, you're not going to know everything if you're a senior leader, or it doesn't matter what level, but especially if you're going up when people expect you to. If you're open and honest about it, people will recognize that because your experience then will kick in at some point where it's like,
Totally.
oh, I see that. I see these four pieces. Actually, we should move this around. But if you didn't ask that question, you might not have ever been able to show your expertise or should really show your experience and let it shine. Being open, honest, vulnerable, I think that's beautiful. And it's been what you said, 6 months?
It's about 6 months. Yeah. About six.
And normally it takes people 9 to 12 months to ramp up. So giving yourself some grace, I think, would be helpful. How do you determine though? Okay, you've got in, you started learning. How are you determining what do you specifically do to say this strategy, I'm going to execute on this strategy or I'm not going to execute on it? This thing's not clear. I need to find, how do you know where to dive into and where not to dive into?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You were just saying earlier about like as a leader, where we were talking earlier about having to be being vulnerable and saying what you do and you don't know. And I think like when I think actually back to my time at Asana when I became a VP of sales, having never been a seller or a sales manager or a sales director, right? And I had done none of those things. So I showed up and I was like, "Hi guys, I have no idea how to close a deal, but here is what I can, help you with." And I bring that up because I think that trying to figure out where to spend your time and what is important, that also relies on being open to the fact that you might not know. And you have to collate across what your experience and your intuition and your, past, what you've seen at past companies. You have to be able to put that together with what you are hearing. And what you are hearing is a combination of, you're going to talk to executives and you're going to hear things that are probably in my experience, there's two different types of executives. There are executives that are going to give you, this is a problem that you need to solve. That is, something that is actually a theme, but it's probably so high level that you can't actually go solve that thing. You have to go break that thing down into the 16 different things that that need to be solved. Or there's executives who are, well, the last call that I was on, this is what I heard. And then that's just recency bias, right? You have to match that with actually a bottoms up build. And I actually got great advice at Asana from one of the managers that I had there, where I had said to her, I feel so lost. We don't have any data. I don't know how to like figure out what I should go and dig into, what I should dig into from a strategic perspective, from a tactical perspective. I feel like I'm flying blind. And she was like, you have to go build your intuition bottoms up. Meet with your reps, meet with the managers, get on customer calls. Of course, this was a sales role. And so there's, different like corollaries in other roles. But like you have to kind of do that tops down and that bottoms up, and then use that to figure out how to distinguish signal from noise.
Yep.
And then in there, you can say, okay, this is now what I think we should focus on. This is something that executives care about, but it's also something that is bubbling up from the bottom. Cool, let's go. But if something is just bubbling up from the bottom, but executives don't care about it, then there's a question. Is it because this thing either maybe isn't actually that big of a deal? Or is it because executives need to be told they need to care about it,
Uh,
right? If something's just coming from the top down, sometimes it's, well, where is that coming from? Is this a market force? Is this from our board? Is this from investors? What is driving this? And I think it's important to get underneath. And that is, I think, how you start thinking about it. But now, even 6 months in, far be it for me to say that I know everything because I am learning so much at Figma, which is something that I like love about my job. I was just telling my husband this today that I'm like loving the content of my job and how much I'm learning. But I do feel like my intuition has now gotten stronger to the point where I don't always need to do that validation because I've been effectively doing that validation for the last 6 months. I'm like, oh no, yeah, that's a problem. Let's go deal with this.
so it is really though. There's not some magical thing where you just dust off the fairy dust. It's you get under the hood, you ask the questions, but you don't just get stuck with the higher ups that tell you what to do. You have to go and investigate, like you said, from the bottom up to actually confirm what maybe your intuition's telling you, but also to get a bunch of information that you wouldn't know unless you just get underneath the hood and really
Totally.
inspect it.
Totally.
Let's pivot really quick and talk about AI. You
Who?
know, I know we all talk about this. There's a lot of noise about AI replacing jobs, but I want to talk to you about this because I think what's more important is how we strategically adopt it. And I think
Yes.
I'm working on it. All the places we're working on, like what does it look like 12 to 18 months from now when we use AI? We have no idea. We're literally all of us, which is the coolest thing ever. If you're in tech, we're inventing how we are going to be moving, working, operating for almost probably the rest of the planet in some type of ways. And we're figuring it out right now.
Yeah.
So how are you thinking about AI as a tool? And how are you thinking about how to improve your decision making? How do you make people more effective? What is your strategy around that?
Yeah. So, first off, it's been so interesting for me with AI because my husband is an AI early adopter, true believer. And so he had ChatGPT the day that it came out, and ChatGPT runs my personal life.
Great.
Yeah, no joke. ChatGPT is my parenting assistant. My husband, he has become, which like a little bit to my chagrin, to be clear, like ChatGPT has enabled him to become more handy around the house. And we love that. Except when it convinces him he can do something that, like, he really wants to, and then we, have to like, those baskets back there, were, that he thought he could do, and then, of course, we had to hire a professional because ChatGPT kinda messed.
Didn't realize that ChatGPT
Yeah.
did that, right? And so
Oh, yeah, no.
I learned the hard way as well because it made me think like I'm the smartest, greatest, and I didn't realize it. And I think we all came to this conclusion a little bit ago that watch out for ChatGPT. My friend made a
Right.
GPT that was the opposite of that, that actually told you sucked and made you go through a bunch of doors to get your idea,
I
whatever, off the
I
ground.
think my husband needs a little more of that. Like, do you remember actually they had to roll back recently? I forget which of the models they had to roll back because it got too, like, affirmative. It
Yeah,
was,
it
like,
was out. Yeah,
pumping you up, like, too
way
much.
too much. Yeah.
And my husband said to me, he was like, "Danielle, ChatGPT really thinks I'm awesome." And he, like, loved that, and I was like, "Okay, welcome back."
I learned the hard way. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, so it's just to say then, he's been so into this and like pushing this in our personal lives in a way that is awesome. My son always, whenever we answer a question that he thinks he's 3.5, that he thinks we gave an insufficient answer to, he says, "I want you to ask ChatGPT, mommy. Like, it doesn't seem like you know." So, but professionally, it has taken me some time. I actually, in between, when I was at Asana and now being at Figma, which is part of the reason I actually decided to go back to kind of my home of strategy, was I took a sabbatical. I took 6 months off. Now, I guess about a year ago is when I started that sabbatical, which is just as AI was really starting to hit in a professional capacity. And so I had this lovely 6 months hanging with my kids, hanging in my new suburban backyard, and then came back into the world of AI. And Figma is a product development tool. And that is where AI is currently really changing the way that people work. And so I spend a lot. I literally probably at this point spend 50 to 75% of my day thinking about AI, the AI market, what that means for Figma, what that means for our products, how we get customers to use our products, what matters, and how do you price AI, which, man, we could do a whole podcast on that. And so, I think that there's a couple different ways that it's going to change the way we work. One is just that as a business, you need to learn how to integrate AI, price AI, teach your customers customers how to use AI, right? There's a way in which we at Figma, I think we do believe we have this amazing opportunity to lead with AI and teach people how to use AI to do more and, more, better, faster, etc. But then I also think there is a need to be able to use AI outside of kind of thinking about how selling AI or packaging AI or pricing AI, but in my workflows. But I think that is happening one industry or one function at a time. I actually, through long-standing friendship with Kevin Roose, he has the Hard Fork podcast at the New York Times, and what they talk about primarily is AI. So, had the honor truly of going to their Hard Fork podcast live last week, where he had Sam Altman on stage, and then a number of other really fascinating people in the AI space. And what they discuss, which is what I think is right, which is AI is really changing software engineering right now. Like, that is the place where we are actually seeing job change, and I don't want to say necessarily yet like full job replacement, but really material change to what people's day to day looks like. And software engineering is usually the earliest adopter of a new technology, and so that's kind of the place where it's starting, and it's going to start moving through the rest of our jobs. That said, I hope that they actually mean this when they say it, but I believe it, which is my hope, and the way that I try and think about AI is that AI can enable me to hopefully spend less time on the tasks that are less human and more time on the tasks that are more human. So, for example, we have a new product right now that we are monitoring closely. And so I spent a lot of time this afternoon putting together a spreadsheet of the status of where this new product is with all of a bunch of major customers. Is it blocked? If so, why? Are they using it? Are they enjoying it? What are they requesting? That time, if ChatGPT can do that for me, which I think we're actually getting quite close at Figma to the ability time where I could do that. It's just if it was in one or two sources, I could collate it, but some of this is kind of scattered at this point, so I don't have that ability. I could have spent those hours with people on my team working on coaching and development and helping them think through problems, their own roadblocks, right? So that is my sincere hope for the future of AI is less job replacement and more enabling us to spend time on the things that truly we can only do as humans that are relationship based. And but that's what business is at the end of the day, right? It would be very hard for me to point to anything in the world of business that does not kind of boil down in some way to a relationship.
And so that's the exciting part. So I think people are scared about it, but to your point, which I think I'm listening to too many podcasts about it, and I listened to one yesterday where it was like, in 10 years, the world's going to end. And then this one of the leaders in all of
Right.
AI was
Yeah.
like, but at the same time,
Right.
but it sounds like we have this opportunity. And to your point, with the way you're thinking about strategy is what can I offload that's the less human stuff so I can focus on the human work? And hopefully that's where AI is taking us. So we can actually be more human. I'm in HR, so I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in HR or not, but that excites me that hopefully we're going to a place at work where we're able to be more human and not disconnected. So that's really cool. In interest of time, because we've already been talking for 45 minutes, and I know you probably have to go back to strategy. Let's move to the next segment. This is just a quick one. It's called the Mama Moment. We're going to talk about, we talked about self awareness, but I really want to talk about self awareness and growth. How do you personally think about your own performance and you reflect on performance? What are you doing? What are your habits? What are your conversations? What structures are you doing to make sure you're growing? Because especially now with AI, everything's changing. You have to learn so much. So how are you growing? Not just your team, but for everybody else, you and the people around you. Like, what are you doing to think about that and to actually act on it on growing?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something about being a parent that forces you to think about your own performance and growth at all times.
Fair, fair.
There is no harsher critic of me than my child, of course. There's something someone said to me once, and I think this is so accurate, that the thing about like relationships and close relationships, be they, partnerships or children or close friendships or whatever it is it holds up a mirror to you in a way that you can't look away from. You have to look at that, and or not even have to, you're forced to. You are forced to look at that mirror and see things that are the good, bad, and the ugly. And so I always say this, that actually I started managing, I had my biggest job and started managing my biggest teams at the time at which I became a mother. Literally, I went on maternity leave and came back to like the biggest job I'd ever had. And I think that that really defined the way that I now like to think about like growth and performance and development, because there's in all of us and in anyone that you manage and in your literal children, there's an inner child, right? That is kind of driving actually a lot of what
A
we
lot of it. Yeah.
way more than is comfortable to admit, right? That is driving a lot of our feelings, our thoughts, our reactions. And I think that learning to pay attention to when you are acting in a way that is kind of a manifestation of your inner child or like an unhealed way is really, really important. Because when I think about like my own personal development or my own personal growth, I think about that in the way of kind of learning to, how do I become more of the adult in the room for myself, for my team, for the company that I'm at? And then I can reflect and look back on times when I think that I let maybe something petty or something superficial or something kind of like misleading or something small get in the way of the ability to be my best, most authentic, most grown up version of myself. And so I think about that a lot. I also think about that in terms of it's funny. I think maybe this is just me as a kind of, I'm a very, I mean, I'm literally talking about being a mom in the context of management, right? So I'm clearly someone who's I feel very strongly and like I have a lot of emotions about management. And whenever I get a review, yes, I remember the only one thing that I need to work on or the 10 things, depending on who's giving me that review. But every time I get a review and if my manager sends me my review, which by the way, as you get more senior, you get less and less of those too.
Yeah, you don't get one
And
maybe in 2
when you
years.
get one, you're like, so do you plan to give me one? Okay, good. We're fine. I'm not getting fired. We're fine. I scroll down immediately to what my direct report said about me. That is for me, the most important measure of my performance and my success is if I am helping those who work for me feel good about themselves, feel confident, and grow. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't, times when I've had to deliver really hard messages. I mean, I had a sales team of, 40 junior sellers. Like I've delivered a lot of hard messages in my time. But even those hard messages can be delivered in the context of seeing someone else's humanness and their skills. And there's always something that someone could be doing where they would, where they could improve, and you can deliver that in a compassionate way, or something other career they should be doing because they're just in the wrong place, right? And so anyway, that for me is always my biggest measure. I care that, obviously I don't mean to, if my boss is listening, I really care I care that they think I'm doing a good job, to be clear. But I mostly measure myself on the impact that I'm having to those who work under me, because I think that it's a very vulnerable place. It's a vulnerable relationship that you have with a manager. Having a strong relationship with your manager can make everything okay, even in the worst of environments. And having a poor relationship with your manager can make everything terrible, even in the
Changes
best of
everything.
environments. And so for me, the impact that I'm having on those who work for me is far and away the most important measure of my performance.
One day I'm going to work for you. I love
Great.
what you're saying. Last
I
piece
have to get more important for that to happen, Brian, but we'll get there. We'll work on that.
we're working the right way. Speaking of people that report into you, so for the people that are not in the room yet, especially when strategies being made, what behaviors help them get in the room to get invited to help shape the decisions? What should they be doing now?
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, this may sound reductive, but find a manager who brings you in the room. I see it as my job to find a reason to bring people into the room, even if it's to talk for 5 minutes or just to listen, because you can't imagine what those rooms are like and how fast the conversation moves and how much it's driven by the individual priorities of different leaders at any point in time, unless you're in those rooms. And so I see that as something I think about a lot, actually, when you start managing more senior people and you start promote people from a manager level to a director level, a director level to a senior director level. Usually that is no longer a decision that you as a leader can make. That is actually something that has to be like voted on by the executive team. And they're like, but how do I even get in front of those people? How do I even have the shots on goal to show them that I'm good at my job? And it's so important that you seek out a manager who sees it as their job to give you opportunities, to prepare you, and then give you opportunities to be in those rooms. So, maybe the most important thing that you do broadly is find a manager who is oriented this way, and who cares about you and your development and your growth and is willing to put their neck on the line for you. But then I would say also, the other thing that gets you in those rooms is just trying to be the person who you see a problem and it's no one else's problem yet, but you decide to make it your problem. You're like, no one is raising their hand to say, this is my problem because I own it based on my job description. You want to be the person who's like, maybe not in my job description, but I know this is something that people care about and I'm going to go figure it out. And taking that attitude towards being the person who takes on those challenges and takes on those problems, that gives you so much goodwill with, not only your management team, but also that's going to give you opportunities to, get into rooms that you otherwise wouldn't naturally get into.
So you need to be in, aware of where you can jump into problems. You need to be able
Yes,
to raise your
please
hand.
don't. Yes,
But
yes.
something you said prior to all this, I think is really key. And I think a lot of us spend time wanting to go to the FANG companies or go to the hottest new AI or Figma, all these amazing companies, which is absolutely right. You want to get to the right companies because that sets you up for success. But I think you said something even more important, which I want everybody to take away. The manager, when you are the one
Everything.
thing that can set you up for success more than anything else, you are my 20th podcast, I believe, my 20th person. This is 20 actually.
But you wanted me to be the first or the second, right?
I did. I swear. And you know it. I reached out to you and it was November when I sent you that email or December. So you
I
know
was
it.
like, "Brian,
I
I'm
have it.
pushing my kids in the swing set."
I have a timestamp. It's in there. I did. But if you really want to set yourself up, everybody's had the same thing. It's the mentor or the manager that looked after them. So if you're really trying to say, I want to make something happen in my career, you probably should, if you can, because you can't do this all the time, find that manager that does want to put you in those rooms, that does want to get you in those at bats. However, you can do that, I think that probably is the most impactful thing that I've had the opportunities to have some really good people. Okay.
Totally. Can I add one thing to that, Brian, which is Figma's the coolest company I've ever worked on. To be clear, it's really cool. Everyone should come work for Figma. Big plus. It's awesome. But I have built a career at relatively boring companies. Like from the outside, that people might say, oh, that's kind of boring. I mean, Glassdoor is not, I loved it. And that was actually the best career experience I ever had. But I don't think anybody would say that that's like the coolest, hottest product in the world, for example. But I have exclusively followed people and not pursued companies. That is how I built my entire career. I thought the leader that I worked with at LinkedIn, I went back to work for him at NerdWallet. And then another leader who we had worked closely with at LinkedIn pulled me over to Glassdoor. And then another leader I'd worked closely with at LinkedIn pulled me over to Asana. And now, of course, I'm working for someone who I worked with at NerdWallet. And so that has never been my filter. And I think that is incredibly important, that the content of what you're working on matters so much less than the person you're doing it with. And so, yeah, sorry to add another element or another, like, keep talking there. But I think that is something that I can't stress highly enough for people, especially early in their career.
That's clutch. That's key. I know I'm going to clip this one and this is going to be its own video because
Cool.
we have to emphasize that one. And I wish somebody would have told me because I was chasing the shiny company versus chasing being somewhere where I was wanted, needed, and somebody that was building me and helping me grow. That matters everything. Because if you don't have the right person, your confidence goes and everything else can go out the door. Okay.
Yep, done.
Danielle, can you believe that we are at 58 minutes of this interview? We're at the very last minute and it's already been an hour. So we're at the closing segment. We'll wrap this
Okay.
up and we'll go back to the job and the kids. The 2-minute drill. We're going to close this thing out. So this is quick fire, quick question, quick answer, and we'll walk out of here. And this has been incredible. All right. First question. What's one skill every future leader should prioritize?
Really understanding how to use data to still signal from noise.
Data, data, data. A book, a thinker, or a podcast that's heavily shaped how you lead besides the Level Up podcast.
A book. It's funny. I have a firm policy of not reading workbooks out of hours. So all of my stuff is going to be about like professional or personal stuff. I mean, honestly, like quick plug actually for my friend's podcast that I was at the other day, Hard Fork on AI and like the future of AI and what that's going to mean for all of us. It's a really fun
Hard
listen.
fork.
Hard Fork.
Okay.
Really fun listen, but also, I think is really it's a great way for those of us who are trying to operate in this new world to try and make sense of it.
I'll be listening. I'll be checking that out. That's awesome. A quote or mental model that you revisit often.
I mean, I think the mental model actually, this is a quote that my mom said to me once, and I love it. She said, "Just because someone throws you a football doesn't mean you have to catch it." And what I take from that is that just because you are given feedback or something happens and someone has an opinion of you, you get to decide what that means for you, how much you take that in, what you do with it. And I think that goes a really long way to preserving, your own peace in the long run.
Mama, you're great. She's got to come over and teach me some stuff. Okay, I love that one. Two more. What's one big people or strategy goal you're excited about over the next year?
I'm really excited. I'm only 6 months into building my team. And so, I am just really excited to get to a place. We've kind of been in reactive mode trying to dig out of not having had a team like us for a while. We're about to kick off our first planning cycle, and it's very exciting to feel like my team is up and running and about to go, answer some really big questions for the business. So I'm super excited about that.
That's fun. That's actually exciting and it's fun. That's what you're doing,
Yeah.
what you're building.
It's not gonna be fun in September, I'm sure. I'm sure
Fair.
you're gonna ask me in September, I'm gonna be like,
Okay.
"Brian, I'm losing my mind."
Fair. I'm glad we
Um,
interviewed you
but
now.
right now it's fun.
I'm
Yeah.
glad we talked about it now. Uh, you talked about professional, personal. What's an off the clock habit that helps you reset?
Off the clock habit, not listening to business podcasts or reading business books ever. I ChatGPT the summaries of those, like we'll take the summaries. For me, the biggest thing is just someone talks about a friend of a friend who talks a lot about the idea of like nervous system reset. And so when I am off the clock, I'm cuddling with my kids, I'm cuddling with my dogs. I'm a big proponent of having animals around who love you no matter what, because your children sort of love you no matter what. But that's a sort of and reading fiction. Read as I said, I'm not reading business books. I read fiction that life like just transports me and takes me into, another place. And there's something about reading fiction that I think opens you to, the broad diversity of human experiences and human emotions and brings a level of like empathy and understanding into a world, into, whatever you do in your day to day that just like reminds you that things are bigger, people are bigger. A lot of fiction is about, taking missteps and coming back from those missteps and, a redemption arc. And I have certainly needed that at different times in my life. I just value that deeply. And I don't put like a threshold. I read whatever I think I want to read, whatever speaks to me. Would rather read a terrible fiction book than I guess watch a terrible TV show, even though to be clear, I do both of those things.
I love that. All right. Last one. If you could build one people or HR focused tool or something that could help
Oh
on the
boy.
people side, or one process around HR, what would it be?
I feel very, very strongly about having a cadence of coaching calls and coaching time that is completely separate from any one-on-ones or any like, run of business. What I would love is I sometimes find that what HR provides, which is still very useful, is like a leveling rubric, essentially like how to help somebody who wants to get promoted in between one level and another. And that's great. And you can use that in the coaching conversations. But probably obvious at this point in the podcast, like to use those conversations in a much broader way and say, how are you? How are you doing? What do you like about your role? What do you not like about your role? Do you want to continue in this role? Do you want to go do something else? Do you want to like take a sabbatical and like go spend 6 months exploring Africa? Like, and I would love to see that something that is those kind of broader development, who you are, how I help you get to be who you want to be professionally, personally, codified in a way that, sometimes it feels like I'll be having conversations, for example, about someone who is awesome but wants to go do something else within the company. And there isn't any way to link that directly within HR to how I can help them along.
I love that. I've been trying to put something together, and
Cool.
I might come back with something. Okay,
Okay.
Danielle, this was incredible. We talked about obviously the value of education, but all the lessons you learned the hard way. You taught us what real leadership looks like and being the human in the room. We talked about AI. You are thoughtful. You're people first. I love that. And I think we need more people and people managers like you. Strategy
Thanks.
doesn't live in a vacuum, but strategy helps us align. It helps us figure out our habits. It helps us figure out how we're going to reflect. So we talked about diagnosing business problems. Like I said, we talked about AI. I just am really thankful that we finally were able to connect. But I'm really thankful that I was able to really dig into your brain because once again, you're able to make me think about how to think about the bigger picture and not be so focused and lasered in, but also be the human in the room. I think everything that you came back to, there's all these amazing things that you do as far as strategy, but it always comes down to the bigger picture and being the human in the room and that humanity I think you lead with and it shows. So I appreciate you. Leaders out there, you should be
Thank
thinking
you.
thinking the same thing. So once again, my name is Brian Bell. This is the Level Up Career Playbook. I am so thankful for whoever you are and wherever you are listening and watching. Please make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll be back next week. Once again, Danielle, Danielle, thank you so much. This has been absolutely incredible. Talk to you all later.